well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, or whenever you may be tuning in to the Growing Our Future podcast. We appreciate you stopping by and taking a little time out of your day to spend a little time with us. It's an honor to have this platform and this technology where we can invite guests on and we can share their experiences, their insights, and maybe along the way we pick up on something that we can put in place in our lives and make our lives better. That's the reason why it's called Growing the Future. I've always said, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, how do you start that? You got to find something to plant. You got to take care of it. You got to harvest it, and you got to share it. And today we have a very, very special guest. Excited for y'all to meet this man. And I'm excited to share his story with you, and you're about to find out why. So, ladies and gentlemen, we have Mr. Winston Chandler. Winston, you're retired. You were at Boys Ranch for years. You drove trucks, but you're just an all-around good guy. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you.
We're gonna dive in here, and we're gonna have a good time talking about some things. Mr. Chandler, before we start, I always ask guests. Every guest on this show gets the same question. And the first question that every guest gets is, what are you grateful for today? What are you grateful for today?
Well, one thing is I'm glad I live in the United States, and I love America, and I love Texas. And the other thing is my beautiful wife that I lost. That was the most important thing to me, because if it wasn't for her, I'd have never made it myself and everything. She is the wise one of the bunch. And so she was always calm and cool and everything. And I was always going 90 miles an hour and everything. And so I'm grateful for that and everything. And then the other thing is the Lord's been with me and helped me and blessed me my whole life and everything. And that's the main thing for me is, you can't do nothing without the Lord. And when you think there's nobody else around, He's the one that comes and helps.
I agree. Everything you said, we could stop right there. So I'm like you. I love my country. I love the liberties that I have, the freedom that I have, that I get to choose what I want to eat. I get to choose if I want to play a sport, what sport. I get to choose what job I want. I get to choose what I listen to on the radio or what news I want to watch or what entertainment. I mean, we are so blessed to live where we live and to have all the opportunities that we have, and then also to be blessed with a beautiful family. So I agree with you. And that beautiful woman that Winston was referring to was Ollie. We called her Ollie Pearl. And that was Mr. Chandler's, like he just said, that was his balance. And Ollie was a great, great, great woman. And I know she was proud of you and proud of all that y'all have accomplished for both your family and for so many others. So thank you for sharing what you were grateful for today.
Well, thank you.
Okay, so let's start talking about some things. So for the folks that don't know, let me tee up why this is a very unique podcast interview. For those that do not know, that may not be familiar with my background, I'm going to give you just a very brief synopsis to tee up this man's role in my life. I grew up in a broken home in Dallas. My mom and dad divorced when I was 6. My father passed away when I was 10. This was in the 70s. I began to rebel. You can't tell now, but I used to have really long, bushy hair, and I got into a lot of trouble. And my mom tried everything. She tried the church. She tried Big Brothers and Big Sisters. She tried several things, and nothing was working. And finally, September 3rd, 1980, she said, that's it. She said, I've tried to help you. I've tried to get you straight. You don't want to get straight. I'm going to get some help. And so we flew from Dallas to Amarillo. At Amarillo, they put me in a van and they drove me 36 miles into the country to a place called Cal Farley's Boys Ranch. And when I got to Boys Ranch, the first thing they did was they took me down and they introduced me to this woman, and her nickname was Abdul the Butcher. and she was the barber, and she cut all my hair off. And then I remember they said, we got to go to the dining hall to say goodbye to your mom. And here are 400 boys in this dining hall. And I remember they said, say goodbye to your mom. And I was still the real tough guy. And I just remember saying, see ya. I mean, that's how I said goodbye to my mom, is I'll see you. The rest of the story, that Paul Harvey rest of the story, is 2 weeks later, I'm on the phone crying, going, Mom, please get me out. I swear I'll straighten up. But I remember I left the dining room and they took me over to the counselor's office. And I was sitting in the counselor's office. And at this point, I got to tell y'all, I was getting a little nervous. I'm sitting there by myself, and this boy sticks his head around the corner and he says, hey, are you the new kid? And I said, yeah, I'm the new kid. He goes, what dorm are you going to be in? And I said, I'm going to be in Bridwell dorm. And the guy goes, ooh, Bridwell. And I said, what's so ooh about Bridwell? He goes, have you not met your dorm parent yet? And I said, no, who is it? They said, his name is Winston Chandler. I said, well, tell me about Mr. Chandler. They said, Mr. Chandler, he's about 5'9". He weighs about 185 pounds. He bench presses over 400 pounds, and he's the hairiest man you've ever seen. And about that time, it's like that kid sees a ghost. He takes off, and this big old cowboy turned the corner, and he took his cowboy hat off, and he said, hello, darling. He goes, my name's Winston Chandler. I'm going to be your daddy for the next 4 years. And I remember my jaw hit the ground. And he said, darling, out here at Boys Ranch, you're going to take math, science, history, English. But out here at the Boys Ranch, you got to take a vocational program. Well, I had never heard of a vocational program. It sounded a lot like vacation. So I was like, see, sign me up for that vocational program. And I remember I asked Mr. Chandler, I said, what do they have here? And you said, well, they had like building trades, Skills USA, and they build houses and work on cars. And then they said, we have this other program called Future Farmers of America. And I said, Future Farmers of America. I said, I can't be no farmer. I'm from Dallas. And then I remember Mr. Chandler looking at me, and he said, darling, you're never going to learn anything unless something depends on you. And I never forgot that. He said, you're never going to learn anything unless something depends on you. So Mr. Chandler told me, he said, I'm going to put you in ag because you're never going to learn anything unless something depends on you. Ladies and gentlemen, that day set in path the reason why we're even on this podcast today. Because Mr. Chandler, this man right here, is the one that put me in agricultural education. This guy's the one that put me in the FFA. Now, I had a rough start in the FFA, but I finally found my way. I went on to become the state FFA president. I went to Texas Tech University on 5 scholarships. I've been so blessed. I've been to coast. I've been in every state in the United States except for Alaska. I've been able to take my family with me. We've traveled all over the United States, even did a mission trip in Mexico. So many of you that may be listening to this know that we started a national organization for foundation officers called LEAD. I don't know that any of the things that have happened within the Texas FFA that I've been privileged to be a part of, or anything nationally, could have ever happened if this man right here had not, on that day in September of 1980, put me in agriculture, put me in ag education in the FFA. Now y'all understand why I said this is a very special guest, because the fact that we're all talking and the fact that you're here today is because of Winston Chandler. So, Mr. Chandler, I've given everybody a little bit of background of how we came together, but let's go back in time. Tell us a little bit about you. Where did you grow up? Tell us a little bit about your family. Give us a little bit about your background.
Well, I was raised on a farm and a ranch, and I had 2 older brothers. We were 7 years apart, and I never did get to be a little bitty kid. My thing, I was driving a tractor when I was 6 years old, and I could shoot a shotgun and ride a horse and do stuff like that. I didn't play with toys. I had to be a big boy like my brothers and stuff. And, it's just, I started out and we worked hard and we played hard. And I think that's what you have to do. And that's, I had I had a good family and stuff like that. And, after, after I got up pretty good size and everything, then my folks split up. So I know what it is to come from a broken home. And so the best thing that happened to me is when I met Ollie Pearl and everything. And she went through the same thing I did. She come from a broken home and stuff. And a lot of my folks, they were alcoholics and stuff like that and everything. And so we decided, well, we're gonna do something different. My kids ain't gonna do that. We're gonna do something next. And we were real young when we got married and everything. I didn't think I'd ever live to be 21. Everybody treated me like a kid, but I had to work like a man and everything. And I finally got to be 21, so they got to treat me like a man and everything. But, the thing of it is, we got away from her folks and my folks, and we depended on one another and everything. And so we made it work. And so we come to Amarillo, and I had all kinds of jobs. I worked in the oil field. I cowboyed on ranches and done this and that and all that. I always had 2 jobs and everything. And but the most important thing to me was, my kids and everything, because I wanted my kids to, I didn't want them to go through what I did, and it's just like the kids I raised at Boys Ranch. Them kids, they come from all walks of life and stuff and everything. And, but I was the youngest dorm parent they ever had at Boys Ranch. I was 25.
25 years old.
25 years old. And I wasn't too much older than the seniors and everything. But, Boys Ranch was a working ranch and everything then and everything. And we took a lot of kids right off the streets and right out of the jail. If they didn't make it at Boys Ranch, they went to Gatesville. Didn't none of my kids go to Gatesville. I kept all of mine and everything. And the most important thing to me is, them kids just needed a chance, somebody to give a crap about them and everything. And so, me and Ollie worked hard at it and everything. And so I know you and Jerry Grooms, y'all recognize us at rodeo one time back in, I think it was 95. And you give us a plaque and everything. And I was working at the rodeo grounds getting ready for rodeo, and Ollie was selling tickets at the barbecue place and everything. And they said, they need y'all at the dining hall. I said, well, I got 2 months to do to go to the dining hall. So anyway, they said, no, you need to get there. So anyway, I got Ollie and we went there. Well, you and Jerry, give us that and all the exes there and all that kind of stuff. That was a big day for us and everything. And so, but it wasn't, I don't think it was really the things that me and Ollie did. I just had a lot of help with the Lord. It helped us, to try to do the right thing with the kids and stuff. And, but, your kids, just like you're one of my kids. You're no different than, my own kids and stuff. Y'all are all the same to me and everything. And so, now I'm an old guy now. And so, all the kids I raised at Boys Ranch, they're all grandparents now, just like kids are and everything. But, my immediate family, I got 12 great grandbabies. I'll soon have 12.
Wow.
Well, that's just part of the family. The rest of the family is the Boys Ranch kids I've got and everything. I have a whole bunch of grandkids and great grandkids and everything. They're family too, and so, I probably got more kids and grandkids than anybody in the country and everything. And I'm proud of that and everything because, it makes you feel good when you help kids and you see how they turn out. And, they're good family men. They're good fathers. They're good husbands. They work hard and they play hard. And that's what I tried to teach at Boys Ranch. We play to win. You never quit. Don't never give up. And there's always a better, it's better. Tomorrow will be a lot better, than today and everything. And so you have to work hard and you have to play hard. And so, at my age, I'm nearly 82 and everything. I still cowboy on the ranch, help feed cows. I detail cars. I make pins and rings. I do woodworking stuff. I stay busy all the time doing something. You can't quit. You got to keep your mind working and your body working all the time and everything. And so, whether you're good at sports or whatever you're good at and everything, your handshake, and when you tell somebody something, it's got to mean something. You got to mean what you say and say what you mean. And I always said about raising kids, you can give out, but you can't never give up because you never know what you're going to say or do that'll change that kid. He may be a bad kid one day, but tomorrow he'll be a better kid or he'll be a different kid and everything. And so, and I took all kinds of kids, and it's hard to raise somebody else's kids and fill shoes for somebody else and everything. But, it's, that's part of it and everything. And so I just always felt like I needed to, do that. And my kids was the first ones to, they ever have a vehicle, ever have a job or a place to live when they graduated. They went to college or they went to the military or they give them their suitcase and haul them to the town office. Well, I told the board one day, I was in there on the grocery run on Friday. I said, if a kid had a job and a place to live and a way to get there, his chances of making it is a whole lot better than a kid you haul to town with his suitcase and say, there it is. And so anyway, I got that changed and everything. So my kids are the first ones to do that. And then the kids that stayed there and didn't have nowhere to go at Christmas, I took them bird hunting and everything. It's, oh no, you can't give them kids a gun. They'll kill somebody. I said, the most dangerous thing they'll ever do is drive automobile. It won't be shooting a gun. And we had game wardens there and everything where they could take the safety course and all of that and everything. And I was proud of that because my kids have got to do a lot more than other kids, and everything. And so, it's all a learning process. Everything's a learning process.
So, Mr. Chandler, let's real quick. So, where were you originally from? Where was home for you?
Plains, Texas. It's
Plains,
down
Texas.
We lived about 3 miles from the New Mexico line, a little place called Bronco. And my dad farmed and ranched there and everything. And when I went to school, I was the first and on and the last and off. And in the wintertime, it was dark when I went to school and it was dark when I got off. And I still had to milk and I still had to gather eggs and feed the stock and all that stuff in the dark with a lantern.
We're going to come back to that. So you and Ollie, you said what year did you move to Amarillo, you said?
Oh, I moved here in 1964.
64. And then when did you go to work for the ranch?
1968. When I first came down, I worked for Cookbook Bread.
And so you and Ollie were y'all were dorm parents, what we used to call dorm parents. And how many years were y'all dorm parents?
27.
27 years.
Yeah. We lived in the dorm longer than anybody that's ever been there, and I've raised more kids than anybody that's ever been there.
So let's talk about that real quick, because we've got a lot of viewers, a lot of folks that'll be listening. So when we say a dormitory, when I was out at Cal Farley's Boys Ranch, there were 16 dorms. There were 8 dorms in what we called the valley, down in the valley, and then there were 8 dorms up on top we called hilltop, or up on the hill. There were 16 dorms. There were 24 boys to a dorm. So think about this. You would walk into the front of the dorm, and we had what we called the big room. So you had a big room. And then on each side of the big room, there was staff housing. So there were staff apartments on the sides. And then as you went into the back of the dorm, there was a long hallway. And back there in the back, there were 6 rooms. 6 rooms, and every 2 rooms were connected by a bathroom. So you had 6 rooms connected by the bathroom. Every room had 4 boys. So every room you went in, there were 4 beds, a study desk, and then each of us had our own individual closets that we were allowed to keep our stuff in. So imagine this dormitory setting and a big room and the staff housing and then each individual room. A normal day for us would look like this. We would get up in the morning and everybody in the dorm, we would clean the dorm. So everybody in the dorm would work on some type of job, clean the dorm, unless you had after-school activities. If you were an athlete or you had after-school activities, you would normally get up and you would go to your job on the ranch. You would have to go take a job on the ranch. If you stayed at the dorm, you'd finish cleaning the dorm, get ready for school, and then we would walk to school. The boys that were out working, they would do their jobs and then they would walk to school. We'd go to school all day long. At the end of the school day, if you were an athlete or involved in school activities, you would go to the school and you would do your practices or whatever that may be. If you didn't, then you had an afternoon job. So then we're either at school or we're working. And then from there, we would go from there to the dining room for dinner that evening. After the dining room, we would come back to the dorms and study or hang out. Now times have changed, but back in our day, we didn't watch TV during the week. The only time we watched TV was on the weekends. Everything in the middle of the week was about studying and being productive and being brothers to one another. And then on the weekends were good because sometimes we got to go to town. You got to go to town once every 3 weeks. If you're good, you have to earn your privileges. At Boys Ranch, everything is earned. It's based on incentive. So we would earn our privileges. And if our privileges were good, we got to go get a Coke or an ice cream or something sweet. And then we would go to church. We'd go to chapel and we would dress up. We'd have chapel dress. We'd go to chapel. And then, like I said, we'd get to go on occasion, we'd get to go to town. And in town, we could go to a movie or roller skating or go to the mall and just do the normal things that teenagers would do. But Mr. Chandler, I hope everybody caught that. He operated in that facility, in that dormitory setting for 27 years. That means 27 years he raised his family in that little apartment right there next to the boys. That means for 27 years, he saw kids coming in and out of his dorm. And I remember when I went there, I was in Bridwell dorm. And, there were kids that had been out there. There had been some kids that had been there for a long time. They had been there since they were little kids. And there were some kids that weren't there maybe a year before me. And they came from all over the country. So it's kind of like going to college. One of the benefits I think of going to college is you get to meet people from all over. And so you get to learn different perspectives. Well, the dorm was the same way. We had people from all over the state, all over the United States that came from different backgrounds. And so we got to learn from one another about life. And this is the guy that led us. This is Mr. Chandler. He led me for 4 years of my life. My high school years, Mr. Chandler made that possible. And so I wanted to make sure everybody kind of had a reference point of what that looked like to be in the dorm to understand what he just shared. So, Mr. Chandler, one of the things that I like about this show is I tell people, if you'll just listen to somebody's testimony, you're liable to learn something that you can put in place in your life. And I've already heard you say a few things loud and clear. Number 1, you better work hard. Number 2, it's okay to relax and play hard. Number 3, you better compete. You're going to have to compete. Number 4, you better have faith. You better have something that you're grounded in. And then number 5, life's not a solo project. You better have somebody or some things around you to help you get through life. And Mr. Chandler, you've already shared all of those in a very short period of time. And that's powerful stuff.
Well, too, when I first started at Boys Ranch, we had 36 kids in the dorm, not 24.
Oh, wow. Wow.
When I first started and everything. And so, but, the first part of the kids was, they were off the streets and out of jail and stuff like that. Well, then later on, we went to taking kids from broken homes and stuff like that. Mama can't raise the kids and work and all of that. That's the reason I wound up with a lot of brothers. I raised a lot of brothers and everything, big families and stuff like that and everything. And so, it's one of them things where, you have to adapt to whatever's coming, and everything. But, it's one of them things, you got to have faith in what you're doing. And, you got to have help from other people and everything. And, that's the reason my thing is, me, when we played sports, we played to win. We didn't play to lose. We played to win. And it's the same way in life. You got to play to win and everything. And you got to count for something, your words got to mean something. You got to mean what you say and say what you mean and everything. And so, that's just part of life, and that's what you have to do and everything. And so I tried to teach, all of my kids that and stuff like that. But look at all the kids, look at what they've done. They've done better than anybody, kid that don't have nothing. Started out with flat nothing and everything, and then look at what to do. Look at you for the day. You were a troubled kid, stuff like that, and all that, and everything. But you had to depend on somebody. You had to believe in something. You had to believe things that I told you and stuff, and what you had to do, and you could learn. I think it was 13 or 15 vocations at Boys Ranch. And I was a big ag guy because I was in ag when I was in school and stuff and everything. And if you taking care of an animal, you're taking care of something other than yourself. It's like playing sports. You learn to play with other kids and stuff. That's how you get friendships and stuff like that. It's a lifetime thing. It's not something that, it's just hit or miss. Maybe it'll work, maybe it won't. It does work. It works every time. You got to have faith in what you're doing, and it's not going to be easy. Every day's not going to be easy. But, at night when you go to bed, you thank the Lord for having a good day, whether it was a good day or not and everything, because tomorrow will be a lot better day and everything. And so you just have to keep plugging along. And so,
something Mr. Chandler just said, I want everybody to know this. And I know a lot of people, again, Mr. Chandler, there are people from coast to coast that have heard me talk about you, have heard me talk about growing up at Boys Ranch. And one of the things that I've never forgotten, by the way, I'm blessed. And I've been able to I've been able to be in a leadership role to help pass things along for others. Millions of dollars we've raised for the Texas FFA. And those dollars started with the story of what you taught me. And I've talked to executives of major companies, Ford Motor Company, Justin Boot Company, McCoy's, all these major brands. And I love it when they ask me, they say, Aaron, what separates these FFA kids? He said, these ag kids, you act like nobody else does what they do. They said, what separates these kids? Doesn't athletics teach teamwork? Doesn't speech and debate and UIL teach all of those things? And doesn't band teach ensemble? And Aaron, what is it that you think you guys do in ag that nobody else does? And I remember one time, Mr. Chandler, you gave me a sledgehammer, and we used to drive those old yellow power wagons. And I remember you gave me a sledgehammer and you told me to drive to the other side of the ranch and bust the water trough for the horses. And I pitched a fit and I said, Mr. Chandler, I don't want to go. It's a blizzard out there, that the wind and the snow. I said, it's 5 miles to the other side. I could get lost. And I'm trying to think of every excuse I could think of. And I'll never forget Mr. Chandler and his old country wisdom. He just looked at me and he said, darling, do you get thirsty when it's cold? I said, yes, sir. He said, don't you think those horses get thirsty too? I said, yes, sir. I drove 5 miles that day and I busted the water trough for those horses. And because of that lesson to this day, I can look at any executive in the United States and I said, I'll tell you what separates our kids from everybody else. Because in the world of agriculture, if we don't do our job, something dies. In the world of agriculture, if we don't feed it and we don't water it and we don't take care of it, it dies. And when it dies, an economy dies. And when an economy dies, a people die. And so I'm so grateful that early on, you had us all in your dorm. We all had ag jobs because you told us it was important to learn that something depended on us. That means we had to get up and take care of it. We had to take care of it at the end of the day. But Mr. Chandler, I want you to know that not just that lesson of doing that and taking care of it, look at what it's produced. It's produced millions of dollars that translate into opportunities for kids because of the way that you raised us at Boys Ranch. I just want you to know I appreciate you, what you taught me.
Well, you're sure welcome.
I don't know if I understood it at the time, but I look back on it. You said something else a while ago. I looked back the other day. I guess I was 56 when I looked back on it, and I said, my gosh. I said, for 4 years of my life, I was doing adult jobs. But I didn't know any better. We all just tried to get the job done. We all, whether it was at the dairy barn or at the hog farm or at the feedlot or bucking hay or just, it didn't matter what the job was. We just knew we had to get the job done. We never looked at it as that was an adult job or that was a kid job. It was just a job. And we all had to pitch in to get it done. And you kind of taught us about that too. You said, we're going to get these jobs done. And not only are we going to get them done, now we'll tell y'all one more thing about Mr. Chandler. You heard him say a second ago, you're playing to win. Well, the other thing that he taught me is you don't do it halfway. You always taught us if you're going to do a job, you do it right. Is that correct?
That's right. Whether you're playing or whether you're working, you got to do the best job you can. Because somewhere down the line, somebody's depending on you. You know, it's not just you. You know, there's always somebody depending on you for something, whether it's something you said, something you done, or, you know, or something you showed them or something like that and everything. And so, you know, that's part of life. You know, everybody needs somebody. And a lot of times you need somebody a lot of the times and everything. And you need somebody you can depend on and stuff like that and everything. And that's the reason you got to keep your faith in the Lord and everything, because he's the one that made you and everything. And so you want to make him proud of you just like everybody else. And so, you know, you got to mean what you say and say what you mean. You know, you want to be a good person, you know, and you know, if you can help somebody, you know, that does you more good. Then it's better to give a present than to receive a present.
Mm.
And so, you know, a lot of stuff I make, you know, I give it away. And my son Wes, he said, Dad, you give away too much stuff. And I said, well, for me, it's just advertisement, you know. Somebody want to know, well, where do you get that? He said, well, I know the guy that makes it, you know. And so that's just part of life, you know. You just have to keep plugging along and everything. And so
one of my good friends, I shouldn't say he's a good friend, he's become a friend, but he's an incredible speaker, by the way. He's going to be up in Canadian next week. His name is Dan Owalabi, and Dan is from Wooster, Ohio, and he's just got an incredible story. But Dan was talking to a group, and he said a lot of times people ask the question, what is my legacy? What is my legacy? And Dan Owolabi says, you're asking the wrong question. He said, the question shouldn't be, what is my legacy? He said, the question ought to be, who is my legacy? Who is my legacy? And I just want you to know, because you said something a while ago, you said 27 years in the dorm. That's a lot of young people that know the name of Winston Chandler and Ollie Chandler and the Chandler kids. One more thing real quick. I'm going to derail us here just for a second, but I just want to share because I want to brag on Mr. Chandler and Ollie and his family. Every year we used to have this thing called the Boys Ranch Rodeo on Labor Day weekend. It was a big deal, big rodeo. I mean, hundreds of thousands of spectators would come to Cal Farley's Boys Ranch, and it was a time for all the alumni. We always came back at rodeo time. And of all the dorms, of all the staff houses, there were more people at Bridwell dorm to see Winston and Ollie Chandler than any dorm at the ranch. Even when they moved out of the dorm, everybody gathered at their house because we all wanted to hang out with Winston and Ollie just one more time. I gotta share a personal story here in just a second, but I wanna cover a couple more things here before we wrap up. You know, Mr. Chandler, I ask people all the time, the kids in Texas, I said, how many high schools are in the state of Texas? And they always say, a lot. And I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of high schools, all right. In the state of Texas, there's over 3,000 high schools. Now think about that. Every one of those high schools is going to have a graduating class this year. They're going to have kids that are going to get out. They're going to be looking for a scholarship, a job, or an opportunity. And I always ask the kids, I said, tell me, what's your competitive edge? What separates you from everybody else? Because if you're going to go after that scholarship, you're going to go after that job, you're going to go after that opportunity, you better have something that separates you from everybody else. A lot of times it can be what you shared earlier, Mr. Chandler. It could be a positive attitude. It could be a professional network. It could be that handshake that you talked about, that firm handshake where you look somebody in the eye, say your first and last name. The bottom line is you got to have a competitive edge. And it sounds like to me that when you were raising kids, that's one of the things that you tried to give us was a competitive edge.
You got to have that. You got to have that, Aaron.
And you taught us that. And so I hope that people that get a chance to watch this podcast, anybody that's ever heard me speak, my kids will tell you that a lot of times they say, you sound like Mr. Chandler. And I said, well, I probably do. There's probably a reason I do. Because he taught me to be fair. He taught me to listen. He taught me to play by the rules. He taught me to be competitive. He taught me to care for others. But I hope you understand why I now said this was a special guest to bring on the show. And so y'all got to hear it from him, not me. You got to hear it from him of why I'm the way I am today. So, Mr. Chandler, I appreciate you so much. If I may close, can I close with one more little story?
Okay.
So it was years ago. I was back at the ranch, and Mr. and Miss Chandler lived in a little apartment there on the ranch. And there was a guest bedroom in the back, and I go back there, and I'm sitting in the guest bedroom. And I remember you came back there, and we sat across from one another, and we were talking. And I just remember, I said, Mr. Chandler, I said, do you remember this? And I told you about something that happened at Boys Ranch. And the reason why this story is so important is because I want y'all to see the heart of this man right here. I remember sharing with you something that happened at Boys Ranch, and I remember you, Mr. Chandler. You teared up, and you looked at me, and you said, darling, I'm sorry. You said, I had to make a lot of decisions at Boys Ranch, and sometimes I think I made the right ones, but on occasion I probably made one that might not be right. And I just want to tell you that I'm sorry. Do you know how big a man somebody's got to be to say that they're sorry? To be able to look at another human being and say, you know what? I try my best, but sometimes I may not get it right. I just want y'all to know that this guy right here was already way up in my book. But the day that this man looked at me and said, hey, I'm sorry. And it wasn't anything major. It's not like the world was going to come to an end. But the fact that I was sitting here having a conversation with the man that took my dad's place, and he told me it's okay to say I'm sorry. That was a big day, Mr. Chandler. I just want you to know that you're a big man. Not just physically. You're a big man because you've invested in so many kids. You've made us all better. And you showed us what it's like to have a heart of humbleness, forgiveness, reconciliation. And I just want you to know that you are appreciated by many, many that you probably have never met.
Well, thank you so much. I'm just, I'm humbled and everything. And, I did the best I could, and the Lord has had most of the work done. I didn't do that much. The Lord done most of it.
You did something. All right, so we always wrap up the show with a fun question. You ready?
I'll try to.
You get a fun question. So if we ever made a movie about Winston Chandler, the life and times of Winston Chandler, who would play Winston Chandler? What actor would play Winston Chandler?
Oh. Oh, boy. I don't know if it's anybody maybe could do that. That'd be a hard question to answer. So it'd have to be somebody, maybe like you.
Nah, I couldn't play you. Let me tell you who I think of. When I think of Winston Chandler, I think of John Wayne. I think John Wayne could play Winston. I think Robert Duvall from Lonesome Dove could play Winston.
Well, maybe so. I don't know, I could put a hat on you and everything, and, you could do the same thing.
Yeah. No, I don't bench 450 pounds. And I wasn't a very good bull rider, but you made me right. I rode bulls for 4 years. I rode broncs for 4 years. Mr. Chandler, I was on a call the other day with all the PBR groups from Texas. You're going to get this, professional bull riders. I'm on a call with all the PBR people. And I just asked them, I met all these people on this call, and I said, has anybody on this call ever ridden a bull before? I was the only person on the call that had ever ridden a bull. And it's because you kind of wanted us to do that. You said you'll never know if you like it unless you try it. So I got to try it for 4 years. I was never any good at it, but I did it for 4 years.
Well, that's part of it. You never know. Kids don't know what they like until they try it, so I don't like that. I don't like this. When you come to Bull's Ranch, you didn't like anything. That's the reason I signed you up for everything.
Well, it worked.
So, kids don't know what they like or what they need or what they want and everything. They get in a rut and everything. And then, if you try sports or if you try this or, look what you did with ag,
Yep.
You could have done the same thing if you was a sports guy.
That's right.
You could have been good in sports. You could have been good this. You could be good. You can do whatever you want to do,
Sure.
And if you got that opportunity and somebody gives it to you, and, you can do anything you want to do. You're blessed with like you say, you're in the best country in the world and everything. And you don't have no excuse for not to be good and do good things. You don't have an excuse. Well, what if you live in a foreign country where they don't have nothing or anything? They don't have a chance to do what you do and stuff and everything. So
A lot of our listeners don't remember the Berlin Wall, but I do. And I remember looking at that wall, and there was a wall that separated communism from freedom. And I remember pictures of 16-year-old kids caught in the fence trying to get to freedom, being shot to death. We have a lot to be thankful. By the way, something else here I got to tell everybody. You need to surround your people like my good friend Cleo Franklin says, he says, get yourself your own personal board of directors. Get people that you surround yourself with that make you better. And I hope everybody understands that I'm a little bit the way that I am today because Mr. Chandler was one of my board of directors. He made me better personally. But I got to tell you, you got to be coachable. If you're not coachable, you can have all the Winston Chandlers in the world around you, but if you're not going to listen, you're not going to get any better. So you got to be coachable. But if you're coachable and you got good people around you,
sky's the limit.
Sky's the limit. The sky is the limit. Mr. Chandler, thank you so much for joining me today on the Growing Our Future podcast. I tell people all the time, if you want to know what the future is, grow it. Well, how do you grow the future? Ladies and gentlemen, you're looking at it right here. You're looking at a man that took time to pour ideas and philosophies and strategies into me. I planted those. And by gosh, they started to grow. And with that growth came opportunities that became blessings for me, and not just me, but my family and for others. If you want to know what the future is, grow it. Mr. Chandler, thank you for joining us today. Thank you for sharing some seeds of greatness.
Well, you're sure welcome, and thanks for having me and everything. And so I hope somebody got a little bit of something out of this and everything. And so I hope it's good, and people won't get bored by listening. So,
well, let me tell you something. There's a great speaker called Tony Robbins. His name is Tony Robbins, and I love his quote. You know what his quote is? Success leaves clues.
Yeah.
Success leaves clues. Somebody watches this podcast, you've left some clues. Thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody else, until we meet again, thank you for stopping by the Growing Our Future podcast. We appreciate you sharing some of your time with us. Everybody be safe. And until we meet again, go out and do something for somebody else. You'll feel good about it. You'll change their world. And guess what? You might even just change the whole world. Until we see each other again, thank you so much.
See ya. Bye.